Yogi Ramsuratkumar ki
Jai.
Sarvam Yogi Ramsuratkumar Arpanamastu. A vibrant evening with powerful Nama Sankirtan at the lotus feet of Bhagwan is verily a fortune for all the devotees. And we are grateful to Bhagwan for that. From yesterday, we have been seeing how Bhagwan appeared in different forms to different people in different circumstances to help, guide and protect. Like we saw yesterday, how Swami came in the form of an old Brahmin to do the final rites, the Vedic rite, after several years of the passing away of his parents. And again, we saw how he came in the form of a Sadhu, in the form of an old man to two different devotees, and helped them, especially the lorry driver, out of the cremation ground in the night. Swami had appeared to people in the form of Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, Muruga, Ayyappa, Shiva, in the form of butterflies, in the form of a cow. Now we shall see one more incident, one more experience of a devotee. How Bhagwan comes to help her. Dhanalakshmi and Govindraj, a devout couple. Dhanalakshmi came with her mother, Valliyamma from Bangalore, with her son, Hariharan, to have darshan of Bhagwan in the ashram. And 2 years after that, her son Hariharan became sick. He had a nervous problem. He even developed fits at one point. He was becoming weaker and weaker. So Dhanalakshmi, her husband was working in a company, so she rushed him to the company hospital. Of course, they kept him in the ICU for some time, for 2 days, and then said, "We cannot do much for this boy of yours. You better take him away." And then the couple put him in another hospital, a Christian Mission Hospital. And he was admitted there in the ICU. He started to vomit. He became unconscious. He was in the ICU. And the doctors said that he needed a head surgery. A surgery was to be done on his head. This was the declaration of the doctors. And naturally, Dhanalakshmi, very devoted to Bhagwan, was started chanting his name, Bhagwan's Nama, right from the moment when he fell sick. And naturally it became more vigorous and rigorous as time passed, especially when the son was in a critical condition. All the time she was chanting Yogi Ramsuratkumar Nama. But that being a Christian mission hospital, there was a prayer hall with the statue of Jesus. So whenever she got time, she would go there and sit there and chant the name fervently. Because of her chanting and prayer, repeated chanting and repeated prayer, 2 days after, the doctor said there was no need for surgery in the head. Instead, they would try some other medicine. That's an optional medical solution. And then they said we would try out this particular treatment. And then he became slowly better. He got discharged. And Dhanalakshmi wanted to offer her thanks to Bhagwan. She went to the prayer hall. And then there she sat, chanted Bhagwan's Nama, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, thanking him heartily for all the help received. And then she looked up. What did she see? It was a 10-feet screen, and she saw Jesus Christ. She saw him, and she was thrilled. She was chanting Yogi Ramsuratkumar Nama all the time. She was praying to Yogi Ramsuratkumar all the time, but she had only the vision of Lord Jesus Christ. She was very happy and thrilled, and she understood that it was Bhagwan who gave darshan to her in the form of Jesus, because it was a prayer hall at a Christian mission hospital. So he came in a suitable form before her. And she understood they were not different from each other. The divinity of Yogi Ramsuratkumar and the divinity of Jesus Christ are one and the same. So here we see there are many, many Christians. Some time back we saw how a girl by name Mary came after reading Bible. She had many questions. And then when she heard about Yogi Ramsuratkumar, especially her neighbors were devotees, staunch devotees of Yogi Ramsuratkumar Bhagwan, and then they were coming for darshan. She was very impressed with the stories, and then she joined them. But she told somebody whom she met in the ashram, she would accept Yogi Ramsuratkumar as a divine person only if he answered 14 questions that she had prepared. Of course, as soon as she was called near, she had all the answers. She didn't have to put any question out, but she had all the answers for her questions. And what was more, she saw him as Jesus. She had a vision of Jesus in him. So there are ever so many stories of people, how people saw Jesus in him. Swami had appeared in the form of butterflies to people, in the form of a cow. When Swaminathan ji celebrated a function in their newly built house. And then, of course, he appeared as sadhus in yesterday's stories. Once, I think it was some 9 years back, a boy by name Ganesan, and he was at that time, he was about 13 years, he came and spoke. He said when he was 6 years, The whole family, were devotees of Yogi Ramsuratkumar Bhagwan, and they had all seen him in person. But he did not have the opportunity to see him at all. So when he came to the ashram, it intensified his longing to see Yogi Ramsuratkumar. So he was crying. He was longing so much to see him. So he and his mother had come here to the ashram, and they were going out. When they were on the mountain path, there was an old man with a beard and dhoti. What was more, he had a hand fan, a country fan in hand. He came near them. He looked at the boy and then pointed to the mountain. The boy was looking at him. He got the feeling it was Yogi Ramsuratkumar, but then the man was pointing to the mountain, the peak of the mountain. So immediately he looked up at the mountain and then turned to this old man. And again the old man pointed to the mountain, the peak. And again Ganesan turned to the peak and then immediately turned to the man because he was drawn. Something pulled him towards him. And the third time again, the Sadhu, the white beard, and a country hand fan pointed to the peak of the mountain. And Ganesan looked up. And the third time Ganesan turned to this old man. He was not there. They did not know where he disappeared. And then he knew that it was Yogi Ramsuratkumar who had come in that form to give him darshan in answer to his longing. There's another story, another experience of a devotee, Sri Kumaravel, who is printing the ashram magazines. Several years back, he had come to have darshan of Bhagwan. They're all devotees, been coming to the ashram for several years now. Once when he had come with his parents, Srimati Tilakavati and Dr. Rajashekar, Swami took the three of them to the corridor of Arunachaleshwara Mandir. There, the mountain, the majestic mountain, showed very close, just behind the temple. You could almost touch it. Such is the view. So this boy was seated there in front of Bhagwan with bent head. Immediately, Bhagwan said, Kumaravel, look at the peak. So he looked up the peak, and soon again he bent his head down. And again Bhagwan said, Kumaravel, look at the peak. And again he looked up. And a while he bent down. And again Bhagwan said, Kumaravel, look at the peak. In very much the fashion, same way as he pointed to little Ganesan. Then Kumaravel understood that the peak, the Arunachaleshwara peak, was the goal of his life. It is the highest point of Arunachaleshwara Mountain. It's also the highest experience a man can have, the huge column of fire, which is the attributeless, changeless Parabrahman, the Deepa Darshan, the highest peak of Arunachala Mountain. Again, once Swami was seated in one of the shops very near his house. It was raining and raining and raining for 3 days. 3 devotees had come, and as soon as they saw Swami seated there, in one of the shops. They came, prostrated before him, and complained that they had been there for 3 days and they could not go around the mountain because of the incessant rain. Then Swami stood up and said, "Oh, don't bother, don't worry about it. You can go around this beggar 3 times. What a fortune. So those people went round him 3 times and they had their sense of fulfillment that they had done the circumambulation of the mountain. And I also had a similar experience, myself and Vijayalakshmi Amma, in 1999 when Bhagwan was seated in the chair near his Shilamurti. It was the Deepam day. Crowds and crowds of people had come to the ashram, filling up the whole space of the ashram right up to the gate and beyond. And there was a dais put up for Bhagwan, because every year Bhagwan would come to the dais and see the Deepam lighted from there. And those people had come, many of them, to see Deepam with Bhagwan. So they were all expecting him to come out any moment. And some foreigners, Mr. Leelozavik, a devotee of Bhagwan, he had come with his own group of people. He was also peeping from there, from outside. And naturally, I felt that people are all there waiting for Bhagwan's darshan. So I went near and I told him, "Bhagwan, it's 5:55. Aren't you coming out?" Bhagwan just looked at me and said, "Okay, you go and sit there." So I came back and sat. And it was 5:57. Again, I reminded him gently, "Bhagwan, it's 5:57. He said, "Oh ho." And then 5:59, and there was not even that sound. He became still. And 6 o'clock, they lighted the Deepam outside, and we could hear the shoutings of the people. "Annamalike Arohara, Arohara, Arohara." So I ran to Bhagwan and said, "Bhagwan, they've lighted the Deepam, and all this," I was thinking those people would clear out soon, and they might want darshan of Bhagwan. So I told Bhagwan, "Bhagwan, those people have started going round the mountain. They've been waiting for you." Bhagwan, all that Bhagwan said was, he looked at me, he said, "You and Vijayalakshmi, both of you can go round this beggar 3 times. I understood because my last sentence was, "Those people have started to go round the mountain." And immediately Bhagwan said, "You too can go round me, round this beggar." Of course, we were very happy and fortunate. We knew what he meant, that he was pointing to himself as the Deepam on the peak of the mountain. So you see, Bhagwan, though he appeared, he still appears in different forms to people, depending upon the circumstances, the depth of devotion of the devotee. We should not forget, he often pointed to the peak. Our life is like a mountain climb. The whole journey of life is a climb up the mountain towards a peak. And the peak, the beacon of light, is the goal of life. Attaining God is the goal of everybody's life. And that's why we are all given this body and this life's journey. But we should remember the structure of the mountain is such. Sometimes while climbing it is up slope and then down slope, and sometimes up slope and sometimes down slope. as we climb towards a peak. We know this upslope is climbing up towards a peak, but more often than not, we forget the downslope is also towards a peak. The downslope is not a setback. It is the very structure of the mountain. You have to go down and then climb up again. There are such structures while climbing up the mountain, but we know that we are always moving towards a peak. This is something we have to remember when Bhagwan pointed to the peak and said, look at it. It means you have to look and hold it as the highest goal of your life, for which this life is given to you in the first place. And we should remember this journey up the mountain towards the highest peak. That upslope or downslope, it's always towards the peak. Which means we have joys and sorrows based upon our karmas of our previous life. Be it a joy or suffering, everything comes from God. This is what Bhagwan said. Everything happens only by God's will. And whatever happens, happens because it's necessary for you. It's necessary for your spiritual growth. And therefore, it's a definite blessing from God. God is perfect, so whatever He gives is perfect. Whatever He does is perfect. Everything, every suffering also is a gift of grace from God. Why? It's only in suffering we get a push, a stronger push towards God. Your push towards God is a definite blessing. It's more than a blessing. It reminds you of the purpose of life. It is only in suffering we think of God intensely. We become dispassionate for a while and we think of God with our entire being because we are desperate. So, as Bhagwan said, whatever happens, happens by God's will, and whatever happens is a definite blessing. Be it an upslope or a downslope, it is still towards a peak. So the journey of life is an upclimb towards a peak of the mountain, towards a beacon of light, towards the attributeless, changeless Parabrahman. But then, in the life's journey, we do not know whether we would attain God, whether we would reach the peak. We would be climbing, but we do not know whether we would be able to reach up to the peak. But we have to do the climbing. And the climbing is nothing but remembering God somehow or the other. Bhagwan often said, it's only when you remember God. God is the goal of everybody's life, and it's only when you remember God you truly live. When you forget God, you are more dead than alive. And he also said, remembering the name is remembering God, and remembering God is living in God. And therefore, let us remember that in the life's journey towards God, every joy, every sorrow is also as much a blessing as the joy of life. Every downslope, every suffering is progress towards a peak. Everything that happens is only positive. There is nothing negative, though at the time of happening, it's happening. However negative it looks, it is still a blessing in disguise because it pushes us towards God. So let us remember, whatever happens in life is only a gift of grace from God. It is happening because it has to shape us. It has to push us towards God. So everything is positive, everything is only progress. All of us, the whole world, without knowing, is moving towards one point. This is what Yogiji used to say. The whole world, the whole cosmos, with all kinds of creatures, it's varied creatures, they are moving towards one point together. There's a collective transformation, a collective progress. And so, in our movement towards the peak, let us take everything as progress, as a gift of grace from God, and it's meant for our inner transformation as well as outer transformation. We shall pray to Bhagwan, who is in the form of a statue here, which is no statue, as Bhagwan reiterated. He never missed an opportunity to tell us that it is his Father himself. Do not think it's a statue. It is my Father himself. If you go near and look at his face, you would know instantly that he is in deep Samadhi. And still, his hand is raised in benediction out of compassion. The only expression of deep Samadhi is compassion towards the entire creation. So let's appeal to his boundless grace. Bhagwan, bestow your blessings upon the entire humanity to be free from the clutches of this dreadful virus.